Welcome to AutoTechNick. Now, since I've been posting these videos of this jet boat rebuild, I've had one main question that keeps popping up, and people are looking for a little bit more detail and information on how I went about marking these stringers to get them cut and fit nicely to the hull of the boat. So today I figured I'd come out here and make a video specifically covering the method that I use to mark those stringers, because honestly, almost every piece of wood that's been cut for this boat, this method has been used on it. It's super helpful. So we're going to jump over the whiteboard. I'm going to show you how it works, how I did it, and how you guys can use it in your projects. All right, so we have what would be the hull of our boat here on the whiteboard right now. Now, when you're installing the stringers, you want them to match the angle of the bottom of the hull, and it's easiest and best just to go ahead and level it out before you start. And that's something you should do before you even start pulling the wood out of your boat. Set the bottom of the hull or the keel to level, because it really helps you build everything off of that. So we now have quite a bit of rise up into the bow that we're going to have to trim our new stringers for. And also on most boats, as the boat goes outward, it has the V shape to it. So not only do you need to accommodate the rise of the stringer, but on the inside they're going to have to taper in to match that V. So you have more than one angle going on. It's really can be tricky to cut. You follow this method, it's going to be cake. Now, to make this easy, I'm just going to reference dimensions that I used on my stringer install because it's fresh in my memory, but it really doesn't matter. It all comes down to the wood that you're using and how it's set up. So for my boat, I was using 2x6 stringers. Therefore, the total height of the wood is 5.5 inches tall. Now, naturally, I wanted as much height of the wood as possible installed into the boat. So at the rear, where it's going to be the tallest, it's going to be 5.5 inches. So in order to get your stringer laid out, you need to either prop it up or cut a piece of wood or anything that you need to do, but you need to have a piece of wood back there that essentially the top of that wood or anything will hold your new uncut stringer at the desired finish height of the stringer. So let's pretend that that board is 5.5 inches. So when my stringer is installed, that's the finished height that I want. Then you take your board and you run it into the boat. And let's pretend this level is my stringer, and you're going to set it there, and it's going to rest on the front onto the bow. Now, since the back is at the finished height, you can adjust your board in and out, which will change how it sits in the bow, which is going to change your level. So the back is consistent, and I'm going to take that board and run it up the bow until it's level. So we're level right there. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark so I don't have to hold this. And I'll run a mark. Let's just pretend that this right here is the entire 2x6. Okay, so that represents our 2x6. Since we had it propped up at the desired height, I knew that the boat was level, and I leveled it in the boat basically by pulling it forward or backwards up here on the bow where it rose. I now have it mocked into place, and this void that's underneath the stringer is actually the shape and size and exact dimensions of the wood that we need to cut. So now at this point, all we need to do is get our marks onto this wood so we can cut it. So it's important. Boat needs to be level. You need the bottom of the stringer at your desired height of the top of the stringer, and you have your stringer in the boat mocked up just like this, sitting level. Now that's where I went ahead and built this jig, and I just ran washers on the bottom of the piece of wood, and I measured from the bottom of this washer up to these holes. Now you can see they're tapered, and I put a pencil in that hole, so when the lead comes out of this hole down to the bottom of that washer, it's exactly 5.5 inches. This second hole was, I think, 3 or 3.25 inches, which was what I used when I put the center of the floor in, because I used the same method. So I just repurposed my tool. You can make any tool you want. All that matters is you need to go ahead and have something that you can run on the bottom of the boat, and that exact height from whatever you're going to use the mark needs to be the exact height of your stringers. So in this example, it's 5.5 inches. So we're going to pretend that I have a jig here with these two markers, and I have a purple and an orange. And we'll use the purple on top. So we'll just pretend that I'm going to hold this exactly at the 5.5 inches. And what you do is you run your tool down on the hull of the boat, and you're going to trace a line on your wood all the way down. And you can see that it's not doing much while it's still level, but once the bow starts to rise right up here, you can see that that mark goes ahead and runs right up the wood and matches the rise of the bow. Now, at the beginning, we mentioned that your boat has a V, so it's going to be different on either side. So that's where you need to make this mark on both sides of that wood. Also, you can make your mark back to the transom to where that all ends. If you watch my video on the stringers, I actually talk about, since my transom is laid back, that I actually had to take a straight edge and run it into this corner of the transom and straight up so I could get my mark. Otherwise, I would have mispositioned my stringers when I cut them. So you need to pay a little bit of attention back there. But once you have this done, you can cut your back of your stringer, and then you follow your line that you traced on both sides of the stringer. But once you have everything marked, the back cut's pretty basic. You can go ahead and just lop that wood off. On the stringer, when you make this cut off of the inside line. The reason why I say cut off the inside line is because your boat goes in like a V, and that's going to be the tallest part of the stringer. The outside edge of the stringer is going to be taller. So if you were to cut the line that you traced on the outside edge of the stringer, you're going to cut it too short. So cut it on the inside line and then come back and cut it again with your blade at an angle, or in my case, I chose to grind down the stringer to make the outside line match the inside line, and that's how I got the shape to the wood. This same basic principle also works when you're making almost any piece of wood. So when I put the bulkheads in this boat and when I cut the transom in the boat, same principle, although done a little bit differently. Let me clear the board and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, this is the same principle, although executed a little bit differently. And on this case, I'm going to use the transom when I went ahead and made the new transom for my boat. So if we're going to go ahead and make an outline of a basic shape, and let's say that's what the shape of my transom, what I need to be, going back into the boat. And let's say I made a rough cut off my initial template of my transom, and we'll just pretend that this purple line is that wood. So you can see that it touches in a few places, but it's not very close. Now, we can use the same method that we use, except we don't really need a jig. Whenever you're working on like the bulkheads or the transom wood, I can go ahead and just use a marker, and I can run the marker along the floor of the boat. So say like this is the floor of the boat, I can run that on the floor of the boat and trace onto my piece of wood. And the marker is going to go ahead and trace that line and the contours of the boat all the way along onto the wood. So when I do that, it's going to kind of follow the same shape of the hole all the way up, and then that tells me where I need to cut the woods. In the areas where I have too big of a gap, it's not going to mark it at all, and then the areas where it's too tight, it's going to go ahead and mark where I need to cut. So then I pull that wood back out and I trim those marks, and on all the wood that I do, I just keep trimming it, and I would either use like a Sharpie, which gave me 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 inch of a gap, or a pencil, which is a smaller gap and takes smaller sections out, and I kind of sneak up onto it. Now, when I made my transom, I was able to leave the top proud, and I was able to keep cutting it and bringing this down till it fit the floor of the boat really nicely, and then I cut the top. You have to keep in mind, if you're making something like a bulkhead where you have 360 degrees around it, and you do this method, you could shrink it, or if you just cut the bottom, the whole piece is going to come down, and then you could have too big of a gap up top. But this basic method of just how to trace off of the floor of what you're cutting onto your item with either a jig like I showed you or just the body of a pencil or marker, it works great. It'll help you get all the wood cut and fit into your boat. So hopefully this explains it. If you guys still have questions, feel free to jump in the comments. Let me know. I really want to be sure that you guys understand how this works. As always, thanks for watching the channel. Appreciate you guys for watching. We'll see you on the next one.